Welcome to Different Gravy, not just another Sheffield Wednesday podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Richard Miller, and my co-host, the Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour, funky like a monkey. Ooh, yeah. Luke Gledall. How are you doing today, Luke?
Good.
What's channeling Macho Man. I'm feeling we need a boost. And I think Macho Man is the man to do it, is the man to bring it to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. How are you today, Rich?
I'm all right. I mean, we'll get into things, but we had plans, and plans were scuppered. Things were changed. We can talk about that, can't we? But Luke, various podcasts called in legal experts, financial experts to talk about the reduction in the financial fair play penalty. But I think we've got a bit of a scoop here. We've gone one better. It's been a busy week for him, but he managed to carve out a bit of time for us. But we've got actually Donald Trump to look into this.
Hello, Different Gravy. Different Gravy. What an important podcast. Finally, someone is talking about the sport that people in America care about the least, which is soccer. But your team is called Sheffield Wednesday, so maybe you're doing a Big Britain. Maybe you're in Britain. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you call it football. You're doing football. You know what? America could still... We didn't have to even call it soccer. We could call it football. If we did with an Australian, how they do Aussie rules football, which is basically just rugby, and everyone's tackling each other and rubbing their stuff in each other's faces and everything. Well, rugby... But rugby... It's a hard one to say. But we love Sheffield soccer team Wednesday. Good job for you guys. But this is awful. This is where the fraud really comes in, and you see people doing things that you've never seen. Stuff like very bad things are happening to Sheffield Wednesday. Very bad. Very bad things are happening to Sheffield Wednesday. You guys had 12 points taken off of you for overspending by the EFL, which has since been reduced to 6 points, but they still took everything off you because you overspent, and the EFL was way out of line, okay? Way out of line. We saw a similar thing happen with our election. We saw a similar thing happening with our election. We had people who were saying, we're going to do democracy, and it's going to be good. We're going to expand elder democracy and make it so that everybody can vote. And then suddenly people's ghosts and people's dogs and Frankensteins are voting, and you know what? The Frankensteins, these are not our people. They're not our people. When you have Frankensteins voting on something, suddenly we're not doing an election anymore. We're doing Frankensteins. We're doing monsters, universal classic monsters. And this is not what the American people signed up for, and this is not what they'd like to happen. There really needs to be a compromise, and it needs to be just for the humans. And no more of these space monsters and Star Wars is voting at our elections anymore. We need to stop the steal and fight the fraud. I hope that you guys stop the steal with EFL, because it's so crazy that EFL would be shaving off your lead because you had a really impressive lead, didn't you? 12 points in soccer. That's like a 400-point basketball game or something. Why don't you guys play a real sport like basketball? Basketball's fun to watch. Soccer's not fun to watch. Watch a bunch of kindergartners smacking each other in the shin. Anyway, I hope you have a beautiful day. Different Gravy, good job for you. Good job with your podcast and everything.
Wow, who would have thought that we would have managed to get such a big draw to this podcast? And it was interesting that he seemingly knew a bit more about the podcast than actually about the football team itself. So there we go. That's how big our stock is getting, folks.
I mean, obviously he's looking for something new to do with his life, and maybe he has his eyes on punditry. You know, Lee Dixon better watch out, because the Donald is on his way.
I would much prefer Match of the Day with Donald Trump.
Anything's got to be better than Danny Murphy. Mm-hmm. I do believe you've got something from the network to give us.
And it's another great timepiece of drama from Hours and Prime. It's another artful period drama. It's The Monk's Gambit. And what better time to look at the gripping story of young managerial prodigy Gary Monk and his rags to riches to rags to riches to rags cyclical story. Monk is played masterfully throughout all ages of his life by This Is England's Thomas Turgoose. We joined Monk as an orphan, where after surviving a car crash that killed both his parents, he was permanently scarred from the accident with a coy look on his face. There in the orphanage, he became addicted to a mind-numbing sister drug to ketamine, without the benefits, and his love of dour chess. It was an aptitude of plodding, slow and strategic chess strategies that defined his transition to his blossoming football managerial career. Watch as the man who mastered the Sicilian defence transitioned to the Monkian defence of claiming that what's wrong is a series of individual errors and now word to fix on the training ground. Monk's Gambit will make you say, "We're forked."
Oh, superb. And, well, yeah, I mean, you've got to strike while the iron's hot with that type of drama, haven't you? And
exactly.
Fantastic. I mean, the
thing that surprises me the most, Rich, the thing that surprises me the most is obviously this kind of mirrors and kind of looks after, the Queen's Gambit, which has come out, and is also a very excellent show on Netflix, I must say. It's a bit like when Ants came out, and Disney came out with The Bug's Life. It's exactly the same. It's just what happens in Hollywood.
Oh dear. Would that be your preference out of those two movies? You're more of an Ants guy than a Bug's Life guy?
I don't know if I've seen. You're
a staunch Woody Allen supporter still to this day, aren't you? I think that's the main thing.
I think I would go for a Bug's Life. I mean, it is Pixar, isn't it? You can't.
Yeah, it's
much wrong. DreamWorks sometimes can be a bit up and down.
Yeah. But you haven't. I don't think you've sort of talked about it on this podcast very much. But you sort of occasionally you've sort of said to me, if you make Annie Hall, you can get away with it all. And I think that's quite a controversial take. We should bail. We should pull up. This is
exactly. Yeah. You've made your point, Rich. You've made your comedic points.
Breaking hoo-hoos.
Well, it's another big week in the Wednesday sphere. Somewhat surprisingly, the first bit of news. I think we were sort of talking about how Gary Monk had a kind of 9 lives type effect where it didn't seem to matter whether the news for Wednesday was positive or negative. It somehow gave him a shot in the arm in terms of the life force of his reign as Sheffield Wednesday manager. But it turns out that actually good things happening didn't help him in this case. And Monday evening, we got the news that Gary Monk had been sacked. Were you surprised, taken aback?
I was. Because I mean, here's the thing. I mean, we said I weirdly called this myself because I said after the Wickham game he should be fired now, but he'll probably be given after to the international break.
Yeah,
and that felt definitely the time after losing 4 games on the bounce, 3 of which against pretty ho-hum opposition. I want to say. Brentford, the only one, we'd probably be like, sure, okay, we can kind of sacrifice that as a game. That felt like the time. That felt like the time to pull the trigger, but it wasn't the time to pull the trigger. So then it's really surprised me. The thing that kind of upsets me is it's like we had that was a really positive week last week, the week before this one. The last episode we covered, with the week of the week of spawnily beating Bournemouth and getting a point against Millwall, and then having Nick DeMarco banging a couple of hat tricks in 2 separate games in the courtroom.
Yes.
So that just felt such a positive. We're here. We're now. This is the problem. I mean, it's interesting for timing that we do this. I saw other Wednesday podcasts. Al's Americas record midweek. I think Wednesday Week did one. Dom and James are singing the blues did one to kind of say, look, here's a manager fired, and it's kind of a rush to kind of look back and kind of the thing that kind of upsets me for a few reasons is we now don't have I would have liked to have the period to kind of look back on Gary Monk's time and just kind of make a certain amount of sense of it all. It wasn't good enough, but it had a few moments. I think the problem was it never really, in this managerial linking names, which we can't really get into and can't really have any fun with that. Lee Johnson was named. Lee Johnson was called Streaky Lee by fans and the media. I don't know who really came, because he had a habit of going on good runs and then having bad runs. We never had a good run under Gary Monk. We had plenty of bad runs. We had a few sprinkled results in there, but it never felt like any consistent good spell. And it felt like we were waiting for that, and it felt like that was owed to us if we believed the cut of Monk's jib. I like Monk. I liked Monk. It was only really near the end where I got upset with the monkey in defense.
The monkey in defense.
Because I, for the most part of the time, I didn't think the guy was a man who was deluded. I thought he was a man with plenty of faith and belief in himself. There were no moments where he was coming out with words and we all kind of look at each other and say, this guy's an absolute chancer who's in above his head and he's out of ideas.
Do you not think that maybe that had started to creep in a little bit? Because I thought there was some... It's interestingly, his statement post-sacking doubles down on this, but I thought there's an element of trying to sort of rewrite history a little bit with the way he was looking at the run of games. So, like, the 4 games was getting counted as 2 bad performances, and it's like, but you've lost 4 times in a row, Gary. So it's like, we have put pressure on ourselves with 2 bad performances in a row. But it's like, it was 3 teams we should have beaten out of those 4 games. Let's be honest. If we've got hopes of doing anything other than just staving off relegation by the merest margin, we had to be looking to win at least 2 of those 4 games, and to lose all 4 of them was terrible, frankly. And then to kind of have the revisionist image of it that he's almost completely given up on the Brentford game, there was no chance at all. And one of them, because we kind of got stuck in, that wasn't a bad performance. So he was letting himself off for that one as well. And that to me was a bit worrying, because I agree. I think he's been honest and open before. But it just felt like he was starting to try and edit history to make himself better.
I get that. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. I've maybe been my own monkey in defense of Gary Monk. I don't quite know exactly what it is, and people could come out and say you're an idiot, Luke, and and say, and I think that'd be a fair judgment of myself and my own handling, and look at this situation. I believed his rhetoric a lot. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe he's very good as a rhetorician. I mean, he's also survived some pretty disparate kind of times in Wednesday's history. In recent history, this has been a year like no other, effectively. I don't know. We can still talk about what was the catalyst to make everything just fall. It seemed one of the big catalysts seemed to be Stephen Fletcher getting injured. That seemed to be the big thing, but it really meant that we had zero plan B from New Year onwards, really. And then pandemic happened, then lockdown, we come back. We're in this incredibly weird negotiation. There's this charge looming over the heads of the players, which I think has had an effect, even though they'll probably come out and be like, oh, no, it hasn't. Still business as usual. Yeah. It's given him a lot more time than probably in a regular season it would have. I don't know if it would have been that much better in a regular season, but I think it's almost been. I think it's had a weird, mild positive to have him kind of sustain. I don't know. I don't know how things would be different if this appointment, which we'll come to, was installed in the summer. And also, I think there's a disappointing thing that Chansiri was a man with a lot of faith in Gary Monk. And I think around the time, and if you look at the timeline, everyone bemoans the fact that, we've given this guy a fair chunk of change to conduct a big squad surgery and bring in all his backroom staff to quite a heavy tune. And now they're all dismissed. And now they're all gone.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what the tune was, because obviously we didn't commit to him when it was going to cost us money. We didn't bring those coaching staff in last season, because he was here. Monk was here for most of last season. He missed the start and obviously missed. But so we don't know what the terms were. That it may well have been because we never announce how long the managers' contracts are. So it's not out of the question to think that Chansiri might have said you can have your staff in, but we're going to put clauses in that, if you go, they go too, or whatever. Or this level of severance and things like that might well have been agreed in advance, and it might not be too painful for us. I don't know. So I don't know. I would, to an extent, I would hope we would have had an eye on the fact that maybe this doesn't work, because he had such a black and white first season. Everything up to Christmas was fantastic, and then everything after was terrible.
Yeah.
We had probably league winning form or promotion winning form for 3 or 4 months at the start, and then a run of dreadful, worse than relegation you can't have worse than relegation, but like worse than the relegation candidates. They all kind of outperformed us in that period of time.
Yeah.
So I would hope if we're in this scenario, which seems to have been the norm with managers, that it's a year rolling contract, I would hope in the re-up we've probably sort of done a bit of self-preservation there. I don't know whether that will have happened, because again, we're back to playing Football Manager. But I would hope some sense would have prevailed and sort of said, well, there's every chance. Let's hope for the best that this does work out and he manages to refine that good form. But also the chances are we've had longer of bad form than the good form. So let's make sure we're covered for the eventuality that actually what we've been served up for the last 6 months is what we get from him. And we're probably going to have to get rid of him early doors. Sensible decision making doesn't seem to be at the core of what the club does. So I might be miles off in that case. But I just would hope somebody, because that was the reality of the situation. This was very much, and we all wanted to believe that we could turn things around. It was bad eggs in the dressing room, and there was now togetherness and all. I think both of us, I felt bought into that and wanted to feel that, and that's fine. But the results need to speak for themselves as well. Social media videos are fine, but performances and results are the sort of end all be all of football. And you can get away with bad performances as long as you're getting results. The problem with Gary Monk is we were having neither. And I think we'll obviously come on to the new man in post. We'll talk about that, but. I was sort of saying we're essentially playing long ball football. We're just doing it badly. We're playing effective first football ineffectively. So we've got none of the good stuff of that, but all of the bad stuff. And I was surprised by the timing, because as I say, I felt like he'd kind of somehow managed to get, had another little squeeze of adrenaline into the lifeline of his managerial career at Wednesday. But I was disappointed in his statement where he's like, well, we managed to achieve our target, which was to get out of the negative points by the international window. It's like, well, no, you didn't, Gary. DeMarco did. On the pitch, you failed to get out. You didn't get out of the negative margin by the international break. The 6 points got you out of there.
Yeah. But everything's happened so quickly. The thing that I haven't been able to kind of address and talk to you about, Rich, is how does the points deduction being halved, how does that give us how is that changing our expectation of this season?
If we were sat here and we were looking forward to the next game with Gary Monk as the manager, I would be expecting a season of hopefully scraping by.
Because I mean, in a weird way, I feel like we were probably, this is awful and it's not good, but I think we'd probably be on course for what I feel like me and you predicted, which is staying up by the skin of our teeth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's
and that would be deemed a success in a season where, pre-season, every other fan and prediction person who predicted this league had written Sheffield Wednesday off.
Yeah.
Everyone thought, no one's coming back from that. You're done, basically.
Do you think
we're already preparing, digging the hole for your grave as we speak?
Yes. Hypothetically, though, don't you think those headlines or those predictions would have been the same with -6? I don't think it was the
severity of the deduction.
The severity of it. I think it was form towards the end of last season, plus having a minus total to start with. I would expect.
Then the added bonus of having to have a financially induced culture change.
Yes.
Yeah.
We sloughed off big experienced names. Some of them were performing up to their name. Some of them weren't, for a kind of hodgepodge of all sorts of different bits and pieces that we hope works. Yeah.
So it's a weird middling. I don't know. This is the weird thing. I don't think Gary Monk didn't do what I thought Gary Monk would, and that's disappointing. And that is ultimately a failure. There's no way we can do it around that. I think that, the very much the Gary Monk narrative, like you said, this revisionist history, right? He can go into the next thing, if he is granted another opportunity at this level, and point to other factors that were against him again. I don't know. But I never for a second felt that Gary Monk was, by the way of his rhetoric and what he was saying, I didn't think he was a manager like Billy Davies, who I notoriously dislike, who comes out, managing the opposition side, and you only thankfully see this villain, this pantomime villain, every twice a season on a seasonal rotation. I remember one game we played Forest, and he came to town, and he came out and said if it was a boxing match, the referee would have ended it early. And I'm like, what world are you living in? I don't feel. Maybe that's it. Maybe we've never typically had those characters come out with, are such deniers and people, when they talk, having that character
sort of delusion.
Having that deluded. But then the flip side of that delusion is those people all believe, like the people that irk me, people like in the mold of Billy Davies, they have such a huge and massive belief in themselves. I think it's completely unfounded, but they're fine. They're fine. They're the god in their world. They do. They drop the toast on the floor and blame the toast.
Yes, yeah. Interestingly, he's not had a job for a long time now.
No, I was going to say I'd kind of rather have his name linked than some of the people.
Well, let's talk about. I mean, I know this is a bit kind of previous now because we know who the. Almost expressly timed to ruin a podcast that records at the weekend. They Tony Pulis was named just in time, but some of those other names. So obviously Tony Pulis was close last. Led to believe that Monk sort of pipped him at the post, which I guess we'll talk about when we talk about Pulis himself. But out of those other names, there was sort of there was some really sort of left field ones that maybe we don't want to talk about, maybe we do. But Paul Cook is a kind of evergreen option, it seems.
Paul Cook was the best of what I felt was out there. I really felt that Paul Cook would be a decent appointment for a club like ours in our position. And I think we've talked about this. I don't think that you're too convinced.
I just don't know that he's ever done what we need him to do. I think his successes have come at generally clubs with the biggest budget in the league and an expectation that they will take the league. It's hard to sort of imagine that with the way that Chesterfield are now, but I believe that they'd spent quite a lot of money the season that he got them promoted. They were kind of the bully boys of that league, and the same goes for Wigan. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't have been unhappy to see Paul Cook, but I just sort of feel he's one of these guys that's maybe got a reputation that's slightly larger than his achievements at this point.
Well, it's an interesting point. I think that's fair. But I also like to say that, I felt more despair for, Monk going, not because he's a man who deserves to lose his job, but more because I was not looking forward to what was going to be linked. Again, this has foiled our kind of plans for a podcast. We talked about, this, joking concept of how happy Coach Sakius to want us one and all.
Yes.
You know, it's that favourite holiday of all Wednesdayites, the season that commenced with the sacking of the manager, the time of year when all Wednesdayites put all optimism away with a look at the bookies' favourites. We all grant our wish list to Santa Chansiri, and he nobly discards them for a pragmatic, unpopular appointment or a left field appointment. You know, I'm imagining me and Rich as excited 7-year-olds living in a house together and sharing a bedroom with separate single beds. We get up at 7 a.m. in our jammies, share a look between us of cartoon excitement when we see that our stockings are full at the bottom. It's even larger than the large lumps of coals we get as Wednesdayites, and even bigger than the rare bruised Satsuma that is mistakenly left for us for the foul curse that we embody as ours. We look inside to find it's a head of Gary Monk, which is a balloon filled with tuna with a Gary Monk Permajoy face mask on. Oh joy, Luke proclaimed to Rich, the Monk solstice is over. Santa Chansiri has been and robbed us of our goodwill mince pies. You know, we don't get to have that. We don't get to have, like, the potential of it being potentially someone good, but unfortunately we know it's going to be something disappointing. You know? Maybe in the festive sense we can say, like, yes, folks, much like the Star Wars Holiday Special, it's the Different Gravy New Manager Special. Featuring musical guests, Train, Rednecks, CC Peniston Road, and special appearances, E from Entourage, and Badger from Bodger and Badger, R.I.P. Bodger. I wrote that down, and then I really like the concept of having Badger from Bodger and Badger without Bodger, because he's no longer with us, which is really sad. But then it'd just be like Badger's puppet, just lifeless and animated.
Why not have them both there, lifeless and animated?
A hologram of Bodger.
Just whatever's left. Oh dear. Yeah, I mean that's the thing.
You know, another thing I was thinking midweek, Rich, was it's been a really weird week. I've recently been massively into David Byrne's American Utopia, which was the recording of his live show at Broadway.
Yeah,
where he's doing David Byrne songs and Talking Head stuff, obviously, and thinking about Once in a Lifetime, and thinking about the Kermit the Frog cover of Once in a Lifetime, and just feel like I want to say, you may find yourself wanting a more expensive hoofball merchant than the one you ordered. You may find yourself behind the wheel of a large football club. My God, what has he done? My God, what has he done? But anyway, I'm jumping around all over the narrative. I'd like to come out with something like, I'd like to get all that stuff that we planned out of the way for a bit of levity and hopefully a bit of mirth, because it's pretty grim going from here, isn't it, Rich?
It is. I mean, I don't know whether any other names were worth mentioning, but were there any names that you sort of thought, at least it's not them, when the actual candidate was named?
I genuinely don't know what planet you would be on to think of Soul Calibur. Yes, the Dreamcast.
That would be weird.
The first video game fighter
as manager of Sheffield Wednesday would be really strange. That would be when At takes over the club. Because Pappy Chansiri's really had a long, hard life. And
maybe if At takes over, we can have Salt Bay as our new manager. Maybe. I don't really understand any world where Sol Campbell is a legitimate managerial. I mean, to be fair, if he needs, I understand he's had a pretty bad time in management, Sol Campbell. Maybe if he still believes in his acumen as a manager, he definitely needs to keep managing at the lower league level and do something positive before any opportunity should arise at this level. Like, I would be absolutely disgusted. I'm sure it was just agent talk, but it's depressing to see his name on the bookies list. Really depressing. And
similarly, I would say the same for John Terry, who was another name that was sort of mentioned. I don't want anyone having their first go at this at Sheffield Wednesday.
Oh.
And he's got no link to the club whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, I would, similarly, I would be aghast if we took that sort of silly plunge as well.
Graham Alexander was another weird one as well. I was like, really?
And then, obviously, someone with links to the club. We had Ryan Lowe was another
but that's
name.
more of the constant dialogue of, do we go for a
We like
progressive?
old players. We like old players.
Well, there's that, but there's also he's that. I mean, he was never really a club legend, so it's almost not really worth mentioning.
Remember when he did really
sense.
quite flamboyant warming up at Tranmere? I think that makes a legend, Luke.
I think if the bar is so low that we have a Sheffield United honours board of legends, like if Leon Clark is a legend of a lane, then sure, just side on, Ryan. But Ryan's more in the Ryan Lowe. Sorry, why am I calling that his first name? Sounds like he's a mutual friend of the podcast.
Right, yeah.
Right, Lowe. He's in that mold of a lower league manager who's having great success.
Yeah.
So the question is a time, like it seems like a time for him to change gears and move up in terms of, which I wouldn't besmirch him, but then it never seems, I don't know how much it ever, well, there are more times you think of it not working out, and it also seems to be marred with not working out Wednesday, you know?
Well, that's it. In that sort of virus valley when we were doing things in place of football matches, and we read through the history of Sheffield Wednesday, it felt like we have been in the position to appoint the probably slightly cheaper option, but mainly he's an exciting young prospect manager so many times, and we've taken that option so many times, and it has never ever worked out for us. It's always just come with crushing failure afterwards. So I almost wouldn't wish us in our current position on Ryan Lowe. I think it's too big of a job for somebody that's so sort of young in their career. And again, he's a guy that's maybe been fairly lucky with the clubs he's been at. I don't know. I don't want to speak too much on that because I don't know the situation precisely. But unlike the Championship, it's quite easy to be like the big stack bully in League Two and League One. It doesn't take that much investment to be suddenly the team. Which I think Salford City is kind of a point that shows that with the lower leagues, you know. You can kind of throw a little bit of money around and all of a sudden you can kind of build a promising team and an academy and all sorts of things. Shall we move on then? So we know the
I just want to kind of I kind of want to conclude some people. Like, aren't we almost in that position? I feel like we're almost in that position where we need to gamble.
I'd say we're absolutely not in a position to No.
I don't know.
I don't think in the relegation zone is where you gamble. Personally. I think.
So who else can we talk about in terms of prospective managers before we just?
Well, I'm wondering whether we just need to now get onto the.
The meat of the dinner.
The Welshman in an inappropriate baseball cap in the room.
The Welsh rarebit.
The Welsh rarebit. Move along to the Welsh rarebit main course. So the news broke on Friday the 13th of all days that having loomed like a dark name over the shadow of the Sheffield Wednesday vacancy for so many years, we finally bit the bullet and appointed Tony Pulis.
It weirdly feels all the more real when you say it, we kind of announce it. When you say it for some reason.
I'm very much the voice of authority, I think, for the club, and I want to give it the full weight of the announcement to give him his full name, which is Anthony Richard Pulis.
Tony the Third.
Tony the Third. So, I mean, in a way, it's been frustrating. It's scuppered some plans we had. We were going to do fake interviews and things like that. It's all gone because we had to rush out with the good news. But it also means the fact it sort of happened late in the day on a Friday, it means we haven't had a press conference, which feels odd.
Yeah.
I know there's no real rush. I know there's not. I believe he's sort of taking training today or being introduced to the players today. Why we couldn't have done a press conference on a Saturday, I don't know.
Yeah. that's going to
but
be Monday now, isn't it? That's what's
Monday
been
is when
announced
we're
today.
going to hear
Yeah.
from for the first time.
Which I think we really, really needed that. I think we needed that as fans. I don't like some press conference, the bit of rhetoric.
Yeah.
I think that would make a lot of us feel a bit better about this. I mean, for Tony the Third, now is the winter of our discontent, made tedious by the son of Newport.
So, I think it's fair to say, there was. I never know quite how representative Twitter is of the fan base as a whole, or even Al's talk. I think it's hard to tell how representative that is of the fan base as a whole. But there were several polls and things like that, and it's fair to say appointing Tony Pulis was not probably the fans' first choice, and may well have been for most fans the kind of worst option of the viable ones. Have you, having had sort of 24 hours or so to mull things over and think about it, how do you feel about the appointment now, as it's sort of the reality of it is sinking in?
I think that I'm still. I mentioned that needing that press conference to kind of help me through this period.
Yeah.
It is a sense of grieving. It is a sense of mourning. And it's still coming away to acceptance. I've probably done a few. I've read a few articles. I watched Rob Statton's interview with Lewis Buxton about Tony Pulis.
Who's
I even listened. Who's what?
He was looking fit as a butcher's dog. We could get him back out on the pitch, I reckon.
I think so.
Bring back Captain Bucky. That's what I say. Sorry.
Yeah. And then I listened to, I think I haven't listened to it much previously, the Peter Crouch podcast.
Okay.
They had one where they interviewed Pulis. They brought him on. I watched the 1 hour address, I think, from 3 years ago at Oxford, the Oxford Union. They get all the lucky toffee oiks who go to university in Oxford, and they just get people every week to celebrities for the students to, some brilliant vantage position that they have in life that they can just bring in people endlessly to ask them questions about. So I watched that. I watched some stuff about, a little bit more of his tactics, which I think I know. I think I had a good idea of who Tony Pulis is through his previous teams. The thing I'm saying is I've gone through all this process. I still don't feel better about it. If we were doing this prospective manager special, we would go through all the names and you'd bring up Tony Pulis and I'd be like,
you'd boo.
That's the one I would want the least.
I know.
There's no percentage of want. It's not even a 0.01% of want for Tony Pulis. There's nothing. There's really just nothing there.
Can I be I don't know what the positive equivalent of a devil's advocate is. Can I be the angel's advocate?
Sure.
So I distinctly remember, maybe this is an imagined memory and it didn't actually happen, but I remember Megson being the bogeyman of the Sheffield Wednesday managerial position for a long, long time. He would always get interviewed, he would always get mentioned, and nobody wanted him. I know there's a personal connection, but I remember him getting appointed, and that he was appointed in this similar sort of thing where if you were talking about all the various names linked, he was the one that nobody wanted because he came with this sort of negative reputation in terms of the football that he played. And Megson was an absolute shot in the arm for the club. And in many ways instrumental in turning it around, getting the fan base back on board. And over time, I think you could not argue that the football was good. I don't think I would, I wouldn't listen to anybody telling me that the football under Gary Megson was anything other than very sort of effective, efficient Route 1 at best, and the downsides of that when it wasn't working quite so well. But we had an identity about the way we played. I understood as a fan what we were about, what we were trying to do, what success looked like for our club, and we were hard to beat. And we've had two managers out of the last three that promised being hard to beat and fight and battle. We haven't had any of it. We are the softest team I don't remember what I was not. So I'm young enough that the fall from the Premier League is a fairly vague memory for me. Like I remember bits and pieces of it, but I do remember that year and the interview and the sort of years immediately following. I remember that softness about the way that we played. We were an easy kind of defense to get through. We leaked goals, and that's where we're back to. I mean,
yeah,
Monk. I mean, it's so weird that the good performances are built on the whole team defending, but the bad performances, that everything melted away, and it was just a very poor defense and goalkeeper exposed again and again. I mean, we've got fairly used to losing 3-0 or more, which is a crazy position to be in. So, in a way, I'm looking forward to actually, it does what it says on the tin. And if we can be hard to beat, a tough nut to crack, I can probably take some pride from that. I can probably get some enjoyment from that.
Well, because I know that's your favourite song, as you're a big Hardfire fan, aren't you, Rich?
Rockin' the city. Yeah. Yeah, I am a huge Hardfire fan.
He's often telling me we're all working for the cash machine.
So I think sort of putting my most positive possible spin on things, I think I can see those I can see those comparisons with Megson. Obviously, he doesn't have he's not steeped in a personal history, multi-generational history with the club, which he won't be able to emulate. But
I would rather have a second spell of Megson.
Despite the fact that he's not managed a club for 10 years or whatever it is.
Well, since us.
Pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah, that was it. He's not had another bite of a cherry since, has he?
No.
So that would have been 9 years, maybe 8.5 years to be academic about this, I think.
He did have that caretaker spell at West Brom to kind of break things up, but it doesn't really count, does it?
No, that was hilariously, that was him helping his best mate Tony out.
Yes.
Because Pulis and him are huge mates, aren't they?
Yeah.
As is, I think there was a bit of a contentious thing because Pulis is huge mates with Ian Holloway, and Pulis came to take over Holloway at Palace.
Right, and left under a bit of a cloud at.
And I mean, also, there's not. I think a lot of other people have said this as well, Rich. But just to make the point, Pulis took over from Monk at Middlesbrough.
He did, and that's his last managerial
spell. But I mean, that's still up to a year ago now. No, 2 years.
Yeah.
No, it was last year, wasn't it? It was 2019. Time is becoming very strange during these times.
I mean, I know there's different expectations. So you're supposed to be a kind of promotion-winning club, but that his record at Middlesbrough looks very nice to me. Having sat and watched Gary Monk's Sheffield Wednesday for the last sort of 6-7 months.
Yeah. But again, it's disappointing because it's like this is almost what we expected Monk would be, with a bit more flair. Really,
yes.
This is my expectation for the Gary Monk, tin of biscuits that we got off the shelf at Tesco. We looked at the label and this is what we said it would do, and it didn't do that at all. So the disappointing thing makes me think now is how much of a failing is that? It's definitely a failing on Gary Monk. But I also want to say how much of this is a failure on the players that we have on the club.
Well, I suppose that's the next question. So in terms of how we feel about Pulis, I think fair to say
Pulis has done some good things. He's not his football is from land before time.
Yeah.
I believe the meteor initially came down and a diplodocus chested it down and put some snow on it and hoofed it around the world, and then it crashed, and then it caused the death of all the dinosaurs. But outside of that, records aside, he's had a very positive record. He did brilliant things considering with his style at Stoke. He did an exceptional escape. He clutched victory from the jaws of defeat at Palace to stay up.
Yeah.
West Brom, he was all right. I think he didn't go so great there. Borough hasn't been particularly good, but the disappointing thing with Borough, I think he's definitely I don't think he did a particularly good job at Borough, considering that I think everybody in that expected them to get promoted with the squad that they had. And let's remind ourselves that they had, Sambalonga scoring. I think the season they failed in the playoffs, Sambalonga had 16 goals for them, and they had Traore as well.
Yeah.
So the second kind of question is, do we have the personnel to do? I don't know what Monk was trying to achieve. I also don't think whatever Monk's idea was, which I still don't think was ever fully conveyed and put on a football pitch. I can definitely tell you I don't think we had enough of the personnel to do what Gary Monk wanted to do. So the question then becomes, do we have the personnel to do what Tony Pulis wants to do? I've seen a lot of stuff about him doing a 4-2-3-1 with two very active defensive midfielders. It's a miracle we have two of our defensive midfielders that are fit these days.
Yes, yeah.
Unless we want to put Bannon back down then, because he can ping some diags, from quarterback role.
I'm just looking at Borough. I mean, that season, so he took over from Gary Monk, who had spent a lot of money.
Gary Monk spent a lot of money. Yeah,
a lot of money. So he took over when they were in 9th position, and they did finish 5th. So they finished in the playoffs, and then the next season they finished just outside. They were 7th. So I mean, it's probably not what was necessarily hoped for, but that he wasn't in charge of spending that 50 million. He was working with what Gary Monk had spent 50 million pounds on, which, well, I don't know how different they are as managers, to be honest. Having watched the football under Gary Monk, I think that's, well, sorry, this it's another thought that's popped into my head, because Lewis Buxton talked in that interview about the fact, watching a season of successful football under Tony Pulis, it was not all long ball. There was nice football. And I think that's a weird kind of distinction. I don't think any team always plays nice football, and I don't think any team always plays hoofball. And I think what Pulis tends to do, and I've probably seen the same sort of tactical videos as you. It's probably not a million miles away from the way we played under Paul Sturrock, and it's percentage football. It's not playing it nicely round the back, but there's an aim to how you play forward. So we've, under Gary Monk, suffered since Christmas. And possibly, I think we were as bad before Christmas, but I think Stephen Fletcher was just uniquely good at making aimless balls forward look better than they were. Yeah. Like a goalkeeper doing a Hollywood save, Stephen Fletcher is to the unaimed hoof out from the back. And so this kind of aimless balls forward that nobody can possibly hope to win the header for, and there's no room to build forward momentum from. That is worse than a team that is well drilled and knows what they're doing. And generally, it seems to be the case with Pulis teams, and it was the case under Sturrock. Generally, what you're doing is playing it into the channels so that your wide players can then influence the game, get balls in the box, and you can score goals. And that doesn't sound a million miles away from what we've watched, but if we do that better, that's got to be an improvement, hasn't it? It's maybe not the improvement that we want to see. But I don't think any team ever, because people say they're such and such is they're a real footballing side, particularly in the Championship. But most goalkeepers kick it long. I'd say probably at least a third, if not half the time. Even the teams that insist on playing out from the back don't do it always. It's easy to paint someone in a completely sort of monotone light when you're not watching it week to week. But I remember under Sturrock, nice bits of football, really enjoyable bits of wing play and things like that. And I hope there'll be things to enjoy still under Pulis. And if we're taking points and winning games, that does make everything feel a lot better.
Yes. No, I agree with that. The thing that worries me, though, is the thing I was asking you and saying, should we be in the position now of gambling? I was hoping for at least, because that's the problem. It's you've hired Monk. You thought Monk would do this. Monk hasn't done this. So you bring in a more expensive option to do what Monk should have been doing in the first place. It's depressing. I was kind of hoping for a bit of a change of philosophy of football.
But then Monk wasn't supposed to be a long ball merchant. That's what we ended up doing under him. I don't know. And Jos, any successes he had were always long ball. A lot of what Bruce had us do was long ball. I mean, really, we haven't played football since Carlos, and I just think there's a preference that there's a distinct preference for at least owning what you're doing and doing it properly. It's interesting. What do you do that suddenly makes these players that have been failing miserably defensively? So what do you do that makes them turn things round? I don't know. But then that's the manager's job, isn't it?
I know. The defensive organisation piece that Pulis is probably hopefully going to bring in, and that seems to be a common theme, is that essentially the defenders are pretty much holding hands, mentally, if not physically. That's something that I think is going to be fantastic. I mean, the thing of being hard to beat is fantastic. Keeping clean sheets is a thing. That's kind of what I expected from Monk. I expected us to be organised, expected us to be well drilled, and he was astonishingly poor when it wasn't, because that's the only thing that I'm fucking here for under his kind of tenure. That's his biggest sin. I feel that if we did things right, we could have had a season where, even I joked on a previous podcast about how if the defense is good, then we'll get a Golden Glove for Cameron Dawson.
Yes.
If they do their jobs well enough, we won't need to see Dawson flap it into his net. Put a wee bit of spin on it from his hands, even into the paths of the opposing strikers, or
bit of
into the back
backspin
of
so
the
it
net.
doesn't roll too fast to them. Bit of backspin on it.
There you go.
Well, okay, so I think this probably naturally kind of brings us on to talking about the squad. I mean, interestingly, there's a clip of Barry Bannon being very sort of sage and actually kind of like almost pleased that Tony Pulis, when I presume it was Palace he came into, basically told him, "I don't have any use for you, so you'll be out on your backside as soon as I can get rid of you." I'm sure he said it in much nicer terms. He said, "You're a lovely footballer. If I was going to play football, you'd be my guy, but you're not. I'm not, and you're not." And it's Bannon is being very nice about that situation. But why do we? I mean, it'd be interesting to see what this squad looks like. I mean, if we follow that stereotypical, what we imagine from the outside, having not watched it week to week, what we imagine a Tony Pulis side to look like, I'm guessing we'd have all of the big boys playing across the back. So I would think Iorfa may well go back to right back, because he's another chance to get a 6 foot plus guy in your defense. I don't know. I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm thinking you probably end up with a fit again. Flint would be a first choice.
Oh yeah, well he's previously creamed all over Flint, but then weirdly it didn't really work out for him at Middlesbrough. So I don't know. And
maybe Van Aken for his height, but he doesn't have much battle in him, does he, Van Aken?
No, but we've got a lot of timid centre backs. So
yeah,
this is the problem. I don't know. But to be generous, I think this would be the same problem with any manager coming in.
We've got wingers though. I think that sets us up for, if it's playing down the channels and trying to get those wingers into games. We've got wingers. I think we may see a resurgence of Adam Reach under Pulis potentially. Do you not agree?
Could do. I don't know. I think it'd be more beneficial to have a manager come in and try and see if they can play some football. That would be. I don't think they're so ridiculously and awfully far off.
I'm sure there'll be an extent of what you've got. I just don't know what. I don't know what our team is about. I don't know what we're good at, because we're not good at very much, really.
The times I enjoyed, I mean, like if we had the pace for the counter attack and we had the power, that felt very much like what it was under Megson. I enjoyed the attacking play under Megson. But the problem was when it worked. When it doesn't work, we're still in a position of being like, that was pretty shit today, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's the problem. I mean, that seems to be the big difference. If you're playing on the deck and being nicey, you can have games where it's like, oh, we were rubbish today.
Yeah.
Or Dame's like, well, it didn't work today, but but we played some nice stuff, so it kind of gives you promise for the games where maybe in the future, next game it will work. That seems to be the big difference.
I suppose I may be being too short-sighted in this, but we haven't had that under Monk for so long either.
No.
Because more often than not, it's just been, well, I just don't know what the plan was ever to score goals.
No, because I thought this was the thing, is I thought we'd be good at set pieces, and we seem to go completely to shit on set pieces, right? And that seems to be a big Pulis thing.
Yeah,
it's a big percentage mentality. It's a big, we've got strong athletic players who are huge, who are 7'0". One of the listened to so much Tony Pulis, and I felt fair enough. The guy's not an idiot. The guy's had a big career. He knows a lot. He's got some interesting kind of foibles. It didn't warm me to any more of him as a human being.
No.
He talked about when, they joked about on the Peter Crouch podcast episode he was on about when they signed Crouchy, and he said, well, I wanted to turn us from a rugby team to a basketball team. And it's like, but I was like, that doesn't endear me anymore to you. But I mean, again, it's all creating positions. It is percentage football. It's you're trying to create something positive in those situations and trying to get to those situations as quick as possible. Whether it's a long haul, hoofed ball, or you directly just get it in the mixer from a corner.
But I mean, I don't know how different it will look if it works. I don't know how different it will look to how we were playing under Bruce. Like that's the oasis of good stuff in the middle of
all happens in the final third. It's just a question of how you get there, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
I liked it. It feels like what it was good when it was good under Megson.
Yeah.
The attacking play was good. I mean, it was sparse, but if you make it count, we look deadly. We look effective.
It tends to be good for.
You remember the 4-4 game with Huddersfield?
Yeah, that
really feels. I mean, the biggest sin of that is conceding 4 goals to Jordan Rhodes, albeit a much younger, much more confident, much more mobile Jordan Rhodes. And then spending.
That was a different guy. It
was a different player completely. Jordanos Rhodes, who played for Huddersfield at that time. But the goals in that game were scintillating.
Yeah,
that was the cream of it.
And so there to kind of have a model of not the best goalkeeper, but actually the best defence in a way. Stephen Bywater barely could move, and Stephen Bywater managed to play on for years after he left us as well. But he never looked comfortable making saves, but he was confident, loud, and whatever else. And the defence were good enough that he was just never pressured. That is kind of a model that could cope. One of our 2 young-ish goalkeepers could cope under that, because it's all about the amount of strain they're put under, really. And I loved Bywater's work. I always felt very calm with him in goal, but I was never under any delusions about his ability as a goalkeeper. If it didn't go straight at him, it was in. But he was really good at organising his defence and making sure they didn't cramp him and all the rest of it. So to kind of looking at the squad, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see what he makes of the players that we have, because I do feel we're very kind of formless and shapeless. We don't have an identity about the way we play. We might see some surprising things from players. I mean, I suppose that's one of the things with, but like playing with the wing backs. That I don't know that Kadeem Harris has ever been asked to play wing back in his life before, and turns out he's pretty good at it. And same with Jacob Murphy. He'd never done it in his life, and he's now doing it in the Premier League. So sometimes you're asked to do different things, and you do them very well. It might be that Bannon works really well with enough kind of protection. There's a job for him just sitting back and playing quarterback, launching balls forward. I think he's been asked to do too much by Monk, and it's wearing him out. Our player's been suffering from it. So maybe he gets a role that's a bit more fitted to his the amount of miles that are on the clock. I mean, you don't like to look at. I mean, he's absolutely fit as a butcher's dog. Is Barry Bannon, but whether it's mentally or physically, the way he was being asked to play was just felt like it was too big of a demand on him. And once we got to kind of the 60-minute mark, it felt like he was spent by and large. So maybe we'll see a new lease of life with Bannon if he's asked to do a different role, or maybe he has the Crystal Palace conversation, and it'll be, I'll move you on. If I can move you on in January, I'll move you on, and if not, see you at the end of your contract. I don't know.
Yeah. I'd love to know who's going to become. Well, no, I think a lot about. I was thinking about when Megson was here, and they're not exactly the same manager. They're similar, right? It's a similar kind of ethos. So I think I'm free to kind of go ahead and kind of meander with this mentality. But I loved it. Do you remember his stuff about Jermaine Johnson, where it basically said, just do it in the second, in the opposition half. Don't bother doing stuff like they're doing,
And he was a guy that really benefited from very simple, because it felt like he'd basically been told if it was on your left foot, run, if it's on your right foot, shoot, kind of thing. And that worked really well for us. It worked really well for him. He had some great goal scoring seasons for us.
So I'm wondering about whether that's going to cause a benefit to our Y players. Maybe we've been asking too much of Kadeem Harris. Maybe we're asking too much of Adam Reach as a result. Maybe a philosophy that simplifies things is a positive for those players.
But are we setting ourselves up now that if he's not the second coming of Gary Megson, we're going to be doubly disappointed?
Or maybe it could be better than Gary Megson. I don't know. We're very. I feel we're obviously getting to the point now where we're cautiously trying to bring a bit of optimism around an appointment that really doesn't inspire us.
I think you've got to look at. I mean, they did get fed up in the end, but what he did at Stoke was tremendous.
Yeah, definitely.
And the fans loved it. The Britannia Stadium was a crazy place to go and play. I mean, it became its own challenge, Can you do it on a rainy Tuesday in Stoke? But that was because they're bloody hard to beat.
Yeah.
The atmosphere was intense. I mean, imagine being in a Hillsborough that's intense. I mean, obviously at the moment, imagine being in Hillsborough. But it's a long time since that felt like a cauldron.
It's more of a cauldron inside the home bargains in Hillsborough. And there's another thing about the fact that Pulis seems to instill an underdog mentality. Maybe we could do with a bit of that. I feel we could have done with a bit of that for quite a while. But there's such a weird kind of scope and expectation around our club, which we feed into as fans. And I think I love everything about our fan base.
So to kind of I guess kind of come full circle here, in terms of we sort of talked about what does 6 points back do in terms of aims and predictions for the season. What does this appointment do, along with the fact that we're now, we're in positive point territory, we're off the bottom, we've got a new manager taking over. What does that do to your sort of predictions, expectations for the season going on from here?
I think even if it's bad, I think we'll still do what I thought Monk would have done in the season, which is stay up. That's the thing that kind of worries me. It worried me about the news that he has a big survival bonus, Tony Pulis. We're getting to the point now we're admitting. I don't like the admission that it's a firefight.
Yeah.
I don't like the admission that now that's what it's become at this football club, because everything else just seems so positive. But maybe, unfortunately, that's just the lying rhetoric, maybe rhetoric. Maybe that's, we're not all coming out, and maybe not all either A, have the belief, or B, have a delusion of Shea Dunkley that we're going to...
Good old Shea Dunkley.
Good old Shea Dunkley. But
are we expecting to see him back?
Eventually, but then they had an under-23s game the other day and he didn't play.
Oh.
The under-23s won a game. That was some news.
That's something.
Against Bristol City, apparently under-23s are quite good. Oh, and I think the reason we played was basically because all our under-23s who would have graduated to the full first-team squad went back to the under-23s. So it was full of Big O and full of Penny and and the like, and your boy Shoei.
Yeah, boy.
So
yeah, I think that to me, it's interesting that because it's such a closed shop really under Chansiri. Like, there's not huge amounts of leaks and rumours, and things do seem to happen quite out of the blue, or at least the timing of things is quite out of the blue. This clause that Pulis supposedly has, giving him a big bonus for survival, I just find that interesting because so much around the club seems to be a pretty sort of drum tight in terms of rumours and things getting out. It seems an odd thing to put out there if that's a chosen bit of, we've already talked about, we're a club that doesn't tend to say how long contracts are publicly. So to then say, oh, and by the way, they've got a clause that's going to give them a nice payout if they survive, feels like a weird added detail to give to somebody. I'm not saying that journalists just make things up, but I don't know that it's worrisome in and of itself because, again, there might be a clause that says, well, if you finish 10th, you get double that, and if you finish in the playoffs, you get triple that, for all we know. I think for me, I was disappointed with the naming of Pulis. I don't think there's any two ways around that. It was a heart sink, gut punch type moment. But for me, it's sort of, as I say, I immediately sort of thought, well, I think we will be hard to beat now. I think we'll be safe. I think we'll probably be comfortably safe. I wouldn't go quite so far to say that we'll be sort of nibbling at promotion places, but I would not be surprised if we finish in the top half of the table now, which I don't know I could have. I wouldn't have predicted that under Monk, given the start that we've had. If we were sat at this international break assessing the season so far and where do we think we'll go, I would be still hoping that we finish outside the relegation places and maybe we're lucky enough to get to 20th. Whereas now I wouldn't be surprised if we're fairly comfortably out of that conversation, but that might be based on, I might be putting far too much faith in Tony Pulis because this squad it's hard to know what's there in this squad, really. I think last season I could fairly comfortably say that Monk wasn't getting the value out of the players that he had. I'm less sure of that this season. There's a lot of unknown quantities for me. I still don't know about the front line. I think Windass looks like he should be good and exciting, whether it's all a bit of noise and lights and there's not much substance. That is definitely a possibility. Patterson's very hardworking, but I don't know what ability is there at the end of the day. Marriott feels like a complete miscue. Kachunga looks good, but he's not a striker. Fizeo Delibashiru is so young still. There's been little bright sparks, but it's very limited, his exposure so far. I think Luongo's obviously a great player. So's Bannon. Luongo's got big fitness questions again. I've got questions about the whole of the defence. Apart from maybe Iorfa. I don't trust the goalkeepers. So I suppose I'm more optimistic than I was about the season when Gary Monk was in charge, which in and of itself is a bit of a positive. But I don't know whether that's just based on it's a castle built on sand in terms of confidence, because I am very unsure about this squad of footballers.
Yes, I know. I mean, we'll get there. We'll get to safety. It's gonna be a long season. It's gonna be tough. I think we were doing that. So, but I understand that Gary Monk isn't really inspiring any of us to do such things.
I think when we looked at the season ahead, and I think we were being realistic, I think we were being pragmatic in our sort of choices and predictions, we wouldn't have envisaged getting to just 0 points by this international break. Both of us picked the end of October to be in positive points, and there was 3 games after that. Yeah. So I think we were well behind schedule, personally. We are lucky that there are teams as bad as Derby and Wycombe.
Would you say we were well behind schedule or way behind schedule?
I never quite know which one. I've spent enough time working in North America that is a word that I get stuck on, so I never know which one I'm supposed to say.
No,
but I do think we're genuinely lucky that Derby have been as bad as they have, and Wycombe Wanderers are going to be historically. I think they're going to be like a historically bad Championship team. That's my sort of prediction. I think they'll, they may be sort of breaking some records down there, and Coventry are not far off them. But if you look at the real teams that we would consider we would expect ourselves to be kind of shoulder to shoulder with, somebody like Forest, somebody like Birmingham, we're another 6 points off that. So for me, I just feel like we're behind target. I would say, for whatever Gary Monk said, I don't believe that the target was to get to 0 by this international break. I can only hope that we were planning to be a bit further ahead than that, because 0, if we were on 0 at this international break, I would be worried.
Yes.
Because we would then be 8 points off safety and 12 points off the next team after that. That's cut adrift. But this is a very intense period of fixtures. Things could turn around very quickly. And I think in terms of timing, it felt weird because it felt like maybe Monk had bought those 4 points in a week and the 6 point penalty reduction felt like it had maybe turned things around a little bit for just mentally. That timing felt weird, but I think it makes absolute sense to have sacked him when we did, because hopefully we've got the new man. And a very un-Wednesday-like thing to do is to give the new man a full week ahead of his first game. I'm quite pleased about that.
Yes, that is a good positive.
It's so un-Wednesday-like. No, what you do is you name them at 10-3 on the Saturday, so you don't need to pay them for that week. They watch from the stands. The next game's on Tuesday. That is normally what we do.
Yeah.
Just panicking and falling from one disaster to the next.
The rest of the year, the rest of 2020, we have, let me count here, we have 11 games, basically, when we're back on the 21st. So that's 11 games between 21st and the end of the year. Funnily enough, actually around Christmas. So I think the Boxing Day, we're away at Blackburn, and then we play the week previously at home to Coventry. But in between that week, that seems to be the only kind of midweek period, or like there's actually a period where it's like there's not a game midweek, from what it seems like, if I'm getting the times right there. So basically, it's as thick and fast as you can imagine. Yeah, 26 Boxing Day this year is a Saturday, basically.
Right, okay, so that's why that's...
So, a lot of games. A lot of games to play.
There we go. I think probably that's enough for now. All we can do is speculate, but hopefully maybe we've fulfilled our sort of remit of finding green shoots,
of doing an episode at this time.
Amid the stinking pile of poo, we've maybe found a bean sprout or two to build on. That's such a gross thing. Oh dear.
See if we can grow some mushrooms from this.
Anything from you at this stage, Luke, or are you happy to say cheerio?
Happy to finish the episode, I guess. I feel in a weird place because I feel like I feel like this episode's probably as frustrating as I think it's been a week for Wednesdayites, and frustrating as an appointment.
Yeah. We can only work with what we've got, Luke. And what we've got is Sheffield Wednesday at a pretty low ebb. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. And as I say, I do remember people being distinctly unhappy at Megson getting the job. And that was certainly far from all bad. We just need to line up Dave Jones for the last 6 games or whatever it is.
And then we'll just get promotion.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Well, look forward to
a blaze of glory. Somehow,
if you say it that way, I'm suddenly really optimistic about the rest of the
So
season.
somehow Sheffield United will get relegated. Somehow one of their players will be found to be a sex pest, and we'll get promoted at their expense, and it'll all be good because it's Gary Megson Mark II. Yay! Okay, I'm gonna say cheerio, Luke.
See you, Rich. Yeah.